Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for this important hearing. And, you know, when I hear these expectations and opportunities in space, obviously I think of the companies in our state, SpaceX and Blue Origin, and now, I don't know if it's fair to say trillionaires when these guys are already billionaires, but hopefully it'll be a more impacting event with many, many different products and avenues for people to pursue. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Bridenstine, about weather forecasting and 5G and the degradation that some spectrum sales could have on our weather forecasting. I think I heard that you had some similar concerns maybe in front of another committee, but my colleague, Senator Wyden, and I have sent a letter to the head of the FCC asking for them to make sure that we're not impacting what would be the 24 gigahertz band that would impact that vital information. So do you think that that is possible to give us basically by which band we're talking about and access to impact our weather forecasting?
That's, I think, an important question. I would answer it this way. The 24 gigahertz band is critically important for our ability to characterize the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. NASA is sensing the Earth in every part of the electromagnetic spectrum all the time. 24 gigahertz gives us the opportunity to characterize the amount, the quantity, and the energy state of the water vapor in the atmosphere. And that ultimately is what helps us make determinations as far as weather prediction. Now, NASA does not do weather prediction. We build satellites for NOAA in the Commerce Department so that they can do the operational weather prediction. But there is a risk that if we do not have access to that spectrum, that our weather forecasting could be degraded. We are working right now with the FCC to kind of work through a solution, and that is underway right now, but this is of concern to us, and certainly...
What kind of degradation? Are you talking about in time and information?
Yes, so we talk about weather forecasts in terms of a 7-day weather forecast. So if instead of getting all of the data we are currently getting, if it degrades to a certain percentage, the less data we're able to glean from that part of the spectrum, the more degraded our weather forecasts get. So if we lose, and I don't know what the specific numbers are, but if we lose, say, 50% of the data, then maybe instead of 7-day weather forecast, we would get a 3 or 4 day weather forecast. So these are the kind of impacts that we're trying to work through and understand and work with the FCC in order to mitigate what those impacts would be through this spectrum sale.
Well, the reason why I'm bringing this up, Mr. Chairman, is it does have a connection to our very subject this morning. How do you do space launch if you don't know weather forecasting?
No, we agree. I'll let the Department of Commerce talk about this.
Sure. Thank you. We would echo entirely the comments made by the administrator here. Concerns about a deep reduction in the quality of our Earth observations for weather prediction and things like that. And so whenever we have these spectrum auctions of any kind, we really need to be very careful. At times I worry that we think that there is a one-to-one comparison for the impacts in the terrestrial world as there are in space. And in fact, they're not. I mean, when you're working in space, you have a slightly different scientific buffer that you need. And when you're going to beam back capabilities from 4 billion miles away, I don't have the ability to chop up that spectrum in as small a chunk as you would typically on the ground. And so wherever these spectrum decisions are being made, we have to be very sensitive to the impacts on the space community, and then, Senator, as you suggest, its impacts on things we're going to do in space from Earth.
Well, the reason why my colleague from the Northwest, Senator Wyden, and I sent this letter is because I can tell you people of the Pacific Northwest know what storms are all about, and we know what hot, dry seasons are doing to us as it relates to fire. And so we need the weather forecasting, and we need it in advance. We don't need it 3 days out, 2 days out. We need it to know where and how to get the resources to the location. So we're very concerned, and we hope the FCC will stop their process until they can assure us that this weather forecasting information is going to be available because of the impacts of weather on our communities and safety. But we also see just in this panel and discussion how much in the previous hearing we had last week, the advent of how many launches we're talking about now with various capabilities, that we need to be able to plan those launches and to plan those launches and launch windows that get delicate on their own right, There's complexities to those launches. They need to know what their weather windows are going to be. So it seems to me that whatever the FCC is doing over there is not paying enough attention to this very important issue as it relates to both the safety and security of our citizens and having good weather forecasting data. And we're working very hard on this because we've always worked hard on this because we've had some shadow issues with Doppler systems and things that have prevented us. Either we had 2 back-to-back 100-year floods that we lost life, and after that, NOAA decided, yes, you need a Doppler system for the coast because you're not getting accurate information. And then we've had an impact on loss of life of firefighters because they were sent out when we didn't fully understand wind conditions that were clearly seen in Seattle but not seen in the central part of the state, again, because they didn't have the kind of visibility. So we're for, particularly now, that every particle in a storm can be an algorithm. We are all for having that data and information and calculating it to make us better prepared. And I certainly would want it for our space missions as well. I would want them to have the certainty and assurity that we're going to be able to understand the launch windows and not wreak havoc with everybody related to the launch, not just in the space industry, but commercial travel and everything else that goes with that, because we don't have a picture of what the weather conditions are because we sold the spectrum all to somebody else. So I hope that we can clear this up and get an answer from Ajit Pai and the FCC.
Well, if it would be all right if I could just comment, because we think what you're saying is very important, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by our country. A couple of things. When we talk about where NASA and NOAA, where we play, is in that 23.6 gigahertz spectrum. The auction, of course, is 24 gigahertz. So it's not the exact spectrum where we operate. That 23.6 gigahertz is not determined. It's not like we can go to a different part of the spectrum. It's set by physics. We are sensing passively the energy state of water molecules in the atmosphere. Now, that is set by physics. We can't just go to a different part of the spectrum. Now, here's the thing. In that 24 gigahertz spectrum that is auctioned, I think it's important to note that if the decibel level is low enough, then it won't bleed into that 23.6 gigahertz where we are operating and sensing the Earth for weather forecasting and earth science and climate. So I think there could be an elegant solution here, and certainly we are paying very close attention to it, but the decibel level is really what matters here. And if that decibel level is too high, then it will impact us. If it's not too high, it won't impact.
Well, interference are always the issues in spectrum, always. And so I just think it's too important. All of these things are too important for the public in commerce and everything else, the applications that all this is going to allow to get this right. So I hope that we can get it right. Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.